Boker Tov, today's daf is daf Ayin Hey in Nidrim, Shavua Tov. Says the Mishnah, middle of the page. A man tells his wife, I'm going to be taking a trip next week. He doesn't say it from today because you still might be making the Nidrim, says the Ran, that he may agree with. But he says, while I'm away, I'm not sure, I'm not going to be there. I'm not going to be, they didn't have cell phones. I'm not sure what you're going to say. So any Nidrim you make while I'm away, Mikan doesn't mean from today. It means from the time that I leave, from here, when I'm leaving here, until I return home, Haray and Kayaman. I'm confirming them right now. I'm confirming even in advance before they're made Lo Amar Klum. It's meaningless. It's meaningless. You can't be Makayim. You can't confirm a netter that wasn't made yet. It's not there. There's nothing to have. It's something that I'm going to have next week. I'm doing something about it now. It's not there yet. Lo Amar Klum. Everybody agrees with that. You can't confirm something that's not here yet. Haray and Mufarim, but let's say he wants to break them in advance. Again, anything that any netter you're going to make is broken. I am canceling it right now. Rabbi Lezer Omer Mufarim says it works. Now, Rabbi Lezer agrees with the Chachamim in the case of confirming it. You can't confirm something that's not here yet. It's not around. But he says if to break something, you could break it. If I could break it, as we'll see, after it's here, you should be able to prevent it from coming into being.
Is he talking logic if it didn't occur, it wasn't around, and you can't open it. If it's not around, you can't close it.
We'll see that far. Yeah, that you could say that, and but it's a little bit different. Because to confirm something, I have to strengthen. I can't strengthen something that's not here yet. But to prevent something from happening, maybe you could say it. So that's Rabbi Lezer's opinion. You could break it. We'll see the discussion in the Gemara. Chum say no, ain't a mufer. You can't confirm it. You can't break it if it's not here yet. I'm Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi Lezer says, I'll tell you something. Im hofer nedarim shabo leklal iser. If I can break something which is already, I can permit something which is already prohibited. I can break. You can cancel an netter which is already effective. I can't break something which is not effective yet. And if I have the power, if the husband has the power to cancel an netter which is already it's already been effective, it's already in progress. So certainly you should be able to cancel something which hasn't even started yet. That's his svara. If I can break something after it's made. Now, that svara does not hold for confirming it if it's not here yet. You confirm it after it's made, but if it hasn't been made yet, maybe there's nothing to confirm. But he says, if I can break something after it's here, after it's effective, she has a prohibition. I have the ability, the husband has the ability to break it, to cancel it with no svara, no petach, nothing like that. I can break it after it's here. I certainly should be able to prevent it from happening. Well, the pasuk says, Hareyu Omer, the pasuk says, Isha yikimena b'ishay forenu. Husband will confirm it, the husband will cancel it. If it's possible, if it came into the ability, if you have the ability now to confirm it because it's here, you have the ability to cancel it. If it hasn't come into to the category of being able to confirm it, you can't come into canceling it either. Now, the Ran says, take a look at the Ran. The Ran is in the widest lines, almost halfway down, where it says Masnis in there. That's what he's only saying from the time that he's leaving. He didn't say from today I'm canceling it. It's only his intention is only from the time that he actually leaves. And she's not breaking it from right now. Maybe while he's still home, while she's still with him, he will be Mekayim them. So it's possible that he wants to do it. If he says, but here the issue is in terms of breaking it, we're concerned. He wants to break it, only the ones that are not here, only the ones that he makes that she might make after he leaves town. But in terms of being Mekayim then, he says, he's not doing it from today because maybe the ones that he makes today, he'll want to be Mekayim. We're talking about breaking it He's not breaking it from today. He's breaking it from the time that he leaves, because anything that she makes between now and the time that he leaves, maybe it would have been kind. That's what the Ran says. Okay. So here the Ran says, only for breaking it, Reb Lezer says, more from Mishum Kal V'chomer, as we see in a minute. Made for the Dom Shabocha, so you can be able to break the ones that haven't been started yet. The Ran says, this is why you said, Moshe, this answers your question. Why, if you can break it, you should, the pasuk at the end of the Mishnah, the Chacham say, well, there's a pasuk. Pasuk says, if you can confirm it, you can break it. If you can't confirm it, you can't break it. And since you agree that you can't confirm it, you shouldn't be able to break it either. But if you don't hold that drasha based on this hekesh of Isha Yikamen V'Shafran, if you didn't hold the hekesh, so he says no. But then come out of Rabbah. Then he the Ashkan the Nadarim Shechalu the Chamiri, a neder which is already effective, which is strong and is prohibitive, right? And it's restrictive. Shechalu the Chamiri Masl Kim. There you can confirm it. If it's not so strong because it hasn't been effective yet, who says you can confirm it? Something which is strong and effective, so you could say that is restrictive and it's stringent because it's already effective, so you can confirm it. But if it hasn't been effective yet, maybe you can't confirm it. It's not strong enough to confirm. You could see that far. There is a slight difference as far there. So what he's saying is that everybody agrees you can't be Mekayim, you can't confirm something which is not here yet. Even though you say that, why? Because it's not effective yet. If it's already effective, the netter has already taken effect and she's under this prohibition, so you can confirm it. But if she's not under the prohibition, maybe his confirmation is not strong enough. So the point is, Rav Lezer agrees that you can't be Mekayim it, but he disagrees that you could break in advance. The Chum say, listen, if it's not here, you can't break it. You can't say in advance. Remember, we talked in the case before about he set up an apotropos, a guardian, while he's away. But there, the idea we said is only after he hears it, afterwards he could break it. And even then, the idea was that the apotropos would hear it and break it, right? That was the idea there. But here we're trying like, can a husband break or confirm a neder that she hasn't made yet? All nadarim and that you're going to make later on, are they confirmed? Are they broken? The Chum say you can't do either one. Rav Lezer says you can break it in advance. You can break it in advance. He says, right, because if you could break something which is already there, you should be able to prevent it from happening, shield it, protect it from happening in the first place. Now the Gemara gets into this question. According to Rav Lezer, according to the Chum, we pass like the Chum presumably, and you cannot break or confirm something in advance. It hasn't been there yet. It's only once it's there you can break it. As we said, the husband has to hear about it. If he doesn't, it's only effective. The netter is chal right away, but his ability to break it or to cancel it or confirm it is only from the time that he heard about it. He has that day to hear about it. We'll talk about what that day means tomorrow. Is it that day or is it 24 hours? We'll see that tomorrow, Mitzvah Shem. But in terms of can he break it in advance? Chum say you can't break it or confirm it, or you can't break it or confirm it in advance. Whereas Rav Lezer says you could break it in advance. So now the Gemara has something of a sophistry question. Rav Lezer says you can break it in advance. Any darn that you make while you're away, tell us why, are going to be broken. When Rav Lezer says you can break in advance, what does that really mean? Does it mean that when she makes the netter, it's chal for a second, it's effective for a second, and then it's immediately broken, or it never was there at all? So you say, what's the difference? It's gone anyway. So we see, pardon?
That's true, that there's no if it's going to be
right
away, she can never make a netter.
But she can't make any netter while he's away. Correct. While he's away. He said, while I'm away, she can't make a netter. But the question is, when he says that, according to Blazer, according to Chum, it doesn't work. But according to Blazer, that it works, you can break the netter. So what means, is the netter like there and it's broken right away? Or it's never happened. It's like it never happened at all. What's the nafkamina? We'll see. Is the netter effective and it's voided right away? It's canceled. Or it's not. What's the difference? It's gone, right? The netter's not there. She's not over. If she was over on the netter, if she went to get, she says, all these oranges are forbidden to me, and then she ate the oranges, she's not chayiv because it was batal anyway. Mine after it could go, we're on Amid Beis now, top Amid Beis, could go in the Atvis Achrina Badein, somebody behind Nidra. Somebody else made the net, somebody else said, I also want to be like her. For example, the classic case is, a lady says, I'm a Nazir, a Nazira. I'm a Nazirite, right? That's a kind of a net. Was the next Masechah we're starting in 2 weeks is Nazir. It's connected with, it's a kind of a netter, right? So she says, I'm a Nazira. He told her, I don't want you to be a Nazir while I'm away. If you give any Nadarim that you make while I'm away, you're not chal. And while he's away, she says, I'm a Nazira. And her friend says, me too, and I also. So there's an afkamina going, not the Sachin Baden. Her friends agreed to it also, says, I would be like you. If you say, well, she is a Nazirite for some split second, it is a good holding on, right? It is a good grabbing, right? It's something. She says, me too. So she wasn't a Nazirite for a split second. It doesn't make any difference. The other one says she's a Nazir. Woman number two says, I'm me too. So the other number two is a Nazira. The first wife is her neder was canceled by her husband in advance, but it was there for a second, right? It was effective, and then it immediately became batal in a split second, like a billionth of a second. You know, the solar clock now, they could tuck in a billionth of a second, a nanosecond. You know,
what difference would it make?
What difference would it make for a nanosecond?
No, what difference would it make what she said? Second woman said.
Oh, because her
kavanah is to be a Nazir. It's not to be. Who cares what the first woman was going to be?
So she is a Nazir. She is a Nazir. That's the point. The second one
is a Nazir.
Is a Nazir. So no. Okay, no. Here we're saying this difference. If you say that when Reuben canceled Leah's neder, his wife, he went away. Reuben said, Leah, if you make any Nadarim all away, they're automatically canceled. If you say it never took place, the Nazir, even though she said I'm a Nazira, it never took place because he canceled it. It never was effective even for a split second. So when the second one said Ba'ani, I'm like her, doesn't mean anything because Leah's not a Nazira at all. She was never a Nazira at all. If she wants to be a Nazir, that's her intention. Say I'm a Nazira. But if she says I'm like her, she was never a Nazira. I thought you were asking something else. That what's the difference of where could there be enough mean of a nanosecond? That's the old one about, what's the nanosecond? Nanosecond is the time that it takes for the guy behind you in New York to honk when the light turns green, right? That's the nanosecond. But the point here is, was it chal for a second? And therefore, when the second lady said, I'm like her, she's a Nazira. Or do you say, no, it was never chal, it was never chal at all, she was never a Nazira. So if you say, I'm like her, if the second one says, I'm a Nazira, so she's a Nazira. If she says, I'm like her, well, her or she was never a Nazira at all. That's not going out to Sachin about name, Nedra. If you say it's chal, havit fusu, say it is a good gift. Lo chalan, lo ika mishasha, there's nothing here at all. That's the question. So the Gemara is asking a question according to Rabbi Lezer, who says that you can break your wife's neder in advance. Is it there and it's broken, or it never took place at all? It was protected from ever happening. Now, the Ran here brings down on Avad Aleph, still back on Avad Aleph, two questions he brings down. They ask this question, right? Why do you say, even if it is chal, listen, you said, look at what, this was related to your question, Abram. You're saying if it's chal, her intention was for it to be chal. Why don't you compare this to the case we had at the beginning of the Sechet? We had this case where there's a piece of basar kachim over here, kachim meat. You can only when you're tahor, right? Kachim meat, and it's after shechita kabbalah lachas rika, it's ready to be eaten, and you're even by Israel, like a piece of shlam meat, and you say this other piece of meat should be like this piece of meat, right? This piece of meat, this new piece of meat should be like that piece of meat. What do you mean? Do you mean it's kachim, right? Because it's kachim meat. Because it's like it's also to be eaten, but like the meat was before you did the zrika and you did all the processes, or do you mean that it's like mutter now, like you can eat it now if you're as long as you're tahor, you can eat it now? Do you mean it's also like a carbon? Remember, that's the way you make an edit. It's like a carbon. Do you mean to say this meat should be like shlomim? It's a carbon and you can't eat it. It's like an edit. It's prohibited to be eaten. Or do you mean no, like it's meat which can be eaten right now? The Gemara asked that question. And the Gemara says, Well, we assume over here, Gemara comes out that meat's meat, like you can eat it. Now you can eat it right now. So why don't you say the same thing? When the second lady says, I want to be like her, why don't you say the same thing? I want to be like her, just like she was prohibited for a second, but now she's mutter. I also want to be like her, prohibited for a second, but mutter right now. Why don't you say that? So the Ran says no, because there it's evident when he said this piece of meat should be like that. That's different. Why? There by the piece of meat, the question is, do you mean like the meat was originally, it was part of a carbon, or do you mean right now? And it's different. Why? The shiny awesome number is that because you said this would be like that. Because the intention was it should be like it is right now, just like this piece of meat is permitted to be eaten right now. Also, I also wanted my new piece of meat should be permitted also. When woman number one, Leah said, I want to be in a zero. And the other one said, Va'ani, she meant to say, like you said, what was her intention? She wanted to be a Nazira. Also, Va'ani, she wanted to make a Nazira. She wasn't thinking that the husband told her, any Nadarim you make are going to be canceled in advance. When you want to be a Nazira? I also want to be a Nazira. So here her intention was to be a Nazira. So if number one was a Nazira for a split second, then number two is too, because she said Va'ani. That's one question. But another question he asks is, Makshu Suhacha, Ran 5 lines from the bottom of the page, and I ask this question. The Chora, we had before, remember the case, we had this case before, where a person made, let's say, a netter. He says, let's say, Harani Nazir, right? And that was person number one. Now, number two said, Ba'ani, me too. Then number three said, me too. Then number four said, me too. Each one was like, I want to be like number three. And number five said, I want to be like number four. What happens? What happens when the number one gets a Tar Sadarm? He's not a Nazir anymore. They all fall like dominoes, right? Like a house of cards, right? Because if the first one's not a Nazir, then the second one's not. Like the second, number two said, I want to be like number one. Number three said, I want to be like number two. Number four said, I want to be number three. So they all become both. So here too, why don't you say that? Why don't you say in this case where woman number one said, I'm a Nazira, but her husband had said, I'm about to everything you make in advance. I'm making in advance. So you say, well, the nafkamina was it chal? It wasn't. If it wasn't chal at all, it never took effect. Then number two is not a nazir either. But if number one, if it took effect but was immediately canceled, then number two is still a nazir. Why? She should be like number one, just like we had the case before. Her rating number two is number one, number three is number two, number four is like number three, and so on and so forth. That if one of them, or if there were 10 of them, remember we said it, let's say number five got a Torah Sadarim, right? So what happens? 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 are not. Now 1, 2, 3, and 4 are, because each one said I'm like the previous one. So why don't you, so what's the nafkamina if we're saying here it's nafkamina, was it chal and then it was canceled or not? Either way, she should be like the previous one. So the Ran says, beautiful. That's defka by Hatar Sadarim. What's the basic difference between Hatar Sadarim and Afar Sadarim? Hatar Sadarim, the rabbi, is oker, the whole matter. He annuls it from the beginning. Like you say, like a wedding is annulled. It was like it never took place. No need to get. It's a no, right? Hatar Sadarim, he's made the never was never there. The never was never there. So if number one, there were 10 guys, or number five, let's say, got Hatar Sadarim, so his netter was never there. So 6 was like 5, not there. 7 was like not there. By a forest adarm, when a husband or a father breaks a netter, how does it work? From now going forward, it's only going. It's not like the netter was never there. So if we say that when the husband cancels the netter, it means okay, I'm canceling according to a blazer. We don't hold that way, but according to a blazer, that the netter is the cancellation works. But how does it work? Like that it never took effect, or it was there for a split second and then he canceled it. It's only going forward. So here in this case, when it was a wife, she became a Nazira while he was out of town. And he said in advance, I'm canceling anything you made. What does the cancellation mean? It never was there. So that number 2 was not a Nazira. She was never a Nazira even for a split second. But if you say she was a Nazira for a split second, and then what happened? Then it was canceled going forward. So she was still Nazira for a split second. So when number 2 said, I'm like her, there was something for it to be chal on. That's between Hatar Sadarm and Afar Sadarm. The case before about canceling it of number 10 is like number 9 and so on and so forth. The whole netter, he was never a Nazir at all because he went to the rabbi, and the rabbi was mater netter. It was okel mafreya. It was never there. It was a totally annulled, like it was never there. Retroactively, it was never there. But in the case of a husband, he breaks it only going forward. So even if he said, I'm canceling it, according to Blazer, that works. I'm canceling it in advance. But when I cancel in advance and you make it next week when I'm out of town, it's chal for a second, and then it's broken going forward. So she wasn't a zero for that split period of time.
Hafara become like hafara for in this particular case. That's right.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You can look at lemafrei. But it doesn't mean lemafrei. It means it was never chal. There's a difference here. He's saying, was it never chal at all? And therefore, number two it was never there anything at the beginning. In the cases of the one, number two, and three, one, it was there, and then afterwards it was uprooted. But over here, the question is by a fara of a husband where there's no such thing as being oker lemafreya. The question is, was it chal or wasn't it chal? So according to a Blezer who says you could cancel in advance, doesn't mean that it was never there, or does it mean that it was there and then you uprooted it from there? So Tashma, let's see the third line on Amid Beis. We're going to try to bring a proof. Tashma. We're going to try to bring a proof from the Mishnah. What did the Mishnah say? Amar Blezer. Ima for Nadarim Shabal L'chal Yisur. If he can break it which is already became usher, in other words, which prohibited her already, he can break it after the fact, as we know. A husband hears his wife's netter whenever he heard it, he can break it that day. If he could break it that day, that's what we saw in the Mishnah. He shouldn't be able to break the Nadarim that didn't come into Isser. If he says Shabal Chazar, Shmam Nalachon, it's mashma over here that it wasn't chal at all. Now, how is it mashma here it wasn't chal at all? It's mashma chal. So the Ran says that it's not really the lashon itself, but he says b'shum de bishloma. If you say it was never chal at all, so you have a kal v'chomer. If he could break a netter which is already here, he could certainly prevent the netter from ever taking place. That's his point, right? If you can break a netter which is already here, shaloba. If you can break a netter which is already b'chlalis, so that was effective, she shouldn't be able to break a netter that was never here at all. In other words, shaloba chalis is mashma that's the kal v'chomer. If it was there and then it was broken, so what's your kal v'chomer? So he goes on to say maybe you could still say kal v'chomer, but in any case, that seems to be the question. That the kal v'chomer makes more sense to say if you could break a netter that was already there, you certainly should be able to prevent it from happening. That's this kind of a shmam alocham. Says more no, who says that? Miktanish ein bon. Does it say you can prevent? You can certainly prevent a netter that's not coming into effect, meaning prevent it from ever happening, shield it from ever happening. Shelo bo ktani. It says lo yefer them. You shouldn't be able to break a netter which have not yet come into effect. Mashma, maybe it could come into effect and then break it later on. In other words, from his kal v'chomer, you don't see that it's not going to be effective at all. You want to bring a proof that it'll never take effect at all, and therefore number two would not be like number one. In the case of the two women, the first one saying I'm an azir, and the second one saying ba'ani. No, he just says if he can break a netter which is already chalis, or certainly should be a netter which hasn't yet come into effect. Mitani shein bon doesn't say that they're not coming into effect at all. If it would be shein bon, so you could say that means they're not going to come into effect. But shelo bo sounds like certainly should be able to break a netter which hasn't come yet into effect, but it might come into effect later on for a split second. Mikani shein bon, shelo bo tani adayin lo bo. They haven't come into effect, but it could come into effect later on. That's his question. So Ran said, "Bishlam yamrid lochan isla kal v'chomerti afar b'vatalas and dorm shechaluk far koshmi makva shelo yechulu." Avali yamrid the chaylan u'betelin my kal v'chomer keeping the chaylan harei bo l'chal. So they could come in there. The answer is no. Then Lashon Yitaka can't see it that way. Tashma another proof. This is from the Tosefta, not in the Mishnah. Listen to this. Can you break your own netter? Can you break your own? Make a netter. Can you break it yourself? No. Lo yachal dvaro. You got to go to the rabbi, right? I say go to the rabbi. Go for a tar sadar, right? Can you prevent your own netter from happening? Kol nidre, right? You can prevent your own netter from happening. Say, get up and say, I need a dharma. I'm going to make. And not going to happen. So Rav Lezer said, Kal v'chomer. Listen, listen to this. So you can't break your own netter once you've made a netter, right? Misha nadar. Once you made, you can't break your own netter once you made the netter. Made for nidrei asma ad shalo either, but you can break your own nedarim before they are effective, right? Call nidrei any nedarim I'm going to make next year a batal. Makum shemei for nidrei ishto. So when you can break your netter, your wife's netter after the fact, mishatadar after she made the netter, and it didn't share for nidrei ishto ad shalo did. Certainly you should be able to break the netter before she made the netter. Now, how does this prove about the idea was it effective for a second or not? So from the kal v'chomer itself, you don't see that. Again, what's this kal v'chomer? Madach, what? Where I can't break my own nedarim once I've made them, I got to go to the rabbi, right? But I can break the nedarim before they were ever effective. And when I break my nedarim before they're effective, does that mean they're effective for a second or not? No, it means that it's not effective at all. I say kol nidre, any nedarim that I make are batal from the beginning. They weren't there for a second and then it's batal afterwards. It doesn't work that way. You don't have the ability to break it once it's there already, but you can prevent it from happening. So your nedarim of your wife, which you can break after she's made them, certainly you should be able to break them for. My love the ishto dim delay. So we're assuming that it's when you break your wife's, it's like your own. Mahu lo chaylan, just like your own. You have to break them in advance. That it's not halal. Kol nidre means any nedarim make or batal milachatchila. You can't break it once it's there. So just like yours own, you can only prevent them from happening in advance. Afishtanami to lo chaylan that are not chal at all. In other words, if your wife's also, when you break them in advance, according to Rav Lezer, it's not chal at all. It's not effective at all, even for a second. So that again, what's the kal v'chomer? If my own nedarim, which I cannot break after I've made them, but I could prevent them from happening, and that prevention is certainly prevention in total. It never happened at all, because if it happened, I can't break it afterwards. So certainly my wife's nedarim, which I can break after they're effective, certainly I should be able to prevent them from happening. And we're talking about preventing the same way that I'm talking about my own. Just like my own, I'm preventing in advance, totally. It's the same way my wife's. The Gemara says, no, lo hakadisa. No, the kal v'chomer is there either way. Even if I'm talking about breaking my wife's neder after the fact, and I'm saying, okay, if I can break it after the fact, I should be able to before, but before could also mean I'm breaking it going forward. Because what's the reason why I can break my own nedarim in advance? Why? Because when I make the neder, it's a mistake. Nedarim that you make, whether it's a taras nedarim, going to the rabbi, or making the neder on kol nidre, what does that mean? I say kol nidre, any nedarim I make. If I remembered when I make the neder that I said kol nidre, and I said I don't care about kol nidre, I'm making it anyway. It's a good neder. Why is the neder not effective when I said kol nidre and then I forgot about kol nidre? Because it was a mistake. The Ron explains it's all a mistake. So the whole thing is by the husband, it's all not effective because the whole thing is a mistake. Because it's a mistake. If I go to the rabbi, he explains that it's a mistake. He finds it Pesach. And if I made the neder after kol nidre, it's also a mistake. That's why it wasn't effective at all. But in the case of the wife, it's not because it's a mistake. She made the neder. She wanted the neder. It wasn't a mistake. He's just breaking it because he says, I don't want your neder. I can cancel it. So the two svars are not the same. But the kal v'chomer still say his kal v'chomer was if I can prevent my own neder from happening, even though I can't break my neder after the fact, can't break my own neder. So my wife's neder, which I could break after the fact, certainly I should be able to prevent from happening, but it doesn't mean preventing in total. It means I can prevent it. It means I can cancel it after it's effective. So again, it's not a solid proof. Tashma, another proof. Amar Rav Lezer, listen to this. Now this is very complicated, this next one. Because again, what are we trying? We're trying to prove when a man breaks his wife's neder in advance, according to Rav Lezer. According to us, it doesn't work anyway. According to Rav Lezer, is it chal or not? Amar Rav Lezer. Now, I want you not to look at the Gemara for a second. Don't take your eyes off the Gemara. Look at the Ran, 5 lines from the bottom of the page, and the Ran on the right side. 5 lines from the bottom of the page. Tashma, what's our next proof? Amar Rav Lezer. What did Rav Lezer say? Lezer said, if I can break something after the fact, I should certainly be able to prevent it from happening, right? What did the Mishnah say? The Mishnah said, Rav Lezer, if he can break something which is already prohibited, certainly I should be able to prevent something. I shouldn't be able to break something which hasn't happened yet. Tashma, look at the Ran at the bottom of the page, 4 lines from the bottom of the page. Excuse me, I said 5. 4 lines. Tashma. Amar Blazer. Mikvah yachich. Look at a mikvah. Look at a mikvah. Shamala satmein mitamasan. A mikvah is matire of something which is tamei. Vein masal tamei. Can it prevent? Can I go into the mikvah preemptively? Yes, preemptively. Can you go into the mikvah in advance? Yeah, prophylactic. Yeah, she's going to become tamei, or you're going to have to touch dead sherrits. You're working with you're in a tannery and you need dead animals over there. So I'll go to the mikvah today to prevent me. Of course, it doesn't work. So what do you see? Look at the Ran going. Kachi agir mikvah svarim with pirush Rav Baruch Zal. Welcome Rav Lezer. Hey chidanta kavachomer. You have a kal v'chomer. You say, listen, it's more mistab shioti roy lisbato mashluchal. It's more likely that you should be able to void something, to cancel something which hasn't yet become effective, rather than something which is already effective. You say, right? If he could break his wife's neder after it's effective, certainly he should be able to prevent it from happening, right? Well, By mikveh, you see that's not the case. A mikveh enables you to purify yourself after the fact, but it doesn't work preemptively, like you say. You can't work in advance, right? It's just about the mashalochal. Again, last line on the page. It's more likely to be able to cancel something which hasn't been effective yet. Isuro adayin mimashik far chal, from something which is already effective. Mikveh yochiach shemataris tameim, that it purifies, which is tamei, right? After they became tamei, after they became defiled. The einamatzel al it doesn't prevent some tar. She'im tavel ba'odatar. If you, let's say, you went to the mikveh preemptively while you're still tar, lamahani like tefillah doesn't help that later on. That doesn't prevent you from becoming tamei. If you touch afterwards a dead share, it's not a rabba. Dashina b'sifri. We learn b'sifri by naked and blossom. Yitma. That's famous. Says what's the famous thing? We say tovel b'sheretz biyado. If you go into the mikveh and you're holding a sheretz, does the mikveh help you? No. The mikveh helps you after you became tamei. It'll purify you, but it doesn't prevent you from becoming tamei. Even if you're in the water, even if you're in the mikveh and you're holding the sheretz, it doesn't prevent you. So that's a good kasha on Rabbi Lezer. That's the girsa of the Ran. But then the Ran says, so what do you see from over here? Here the whole idea is they're talking about prevention. So here you say again, look at Rabbi Lezer, and therefore the Gemara goes on saying, Shema mina lo chaylan. You see over here, we don't see the Gemara. You see that it's not chal at all, because that's his whole point. The Amr lo mikveh yochiach she'ena matzel. That doesn't prevent you. We're talking about preventing from happening. According to Rabbi Lezer, it was my mikveh that should prevent from not happening at all. Okay, so that was his proof. According to Rabbi Lezer, because they answered him. Again, this is not Rabbi Lezer. This is the Chacham telling Lezer. According to you, look at mikveh. You say that something which has not been affected yet is more likely to be canceled than something which is already effective. Look at the mikveh, which helps after it's affected, but doesn't help before. That's what I'm saying. However, the Ran now brings down the gears that we have in our Gemara. Now look back at the Gemara. Now open your eyes, look up the Gemara. Look at the Gemara 5 lines from the bottom of the Gemara. We're going to see the Gemara inside now, not the way the Ran had it. Tashma, Amalov, the Lezer. They didn't tell Rav Lezer mikveh yochiach, but they said, look, I'll give you a different kabachomer. Ma mikveh shemal setmei mitamasan. Ma nachat mikveh, which purifies something which is tamei from its tumah, from its impurity. Eina matzala tar milatame, but it doesn't prevent something which is tar from becoming tamei. As we said, it doesn't work preemptively. Adam she'ena malas etatmei mitamasan. Listen carefully. Can a person purify something? For example, let's say a person swallowed a ring which was tamei. A ring which is tamei. He swallowed a ring which is tamei. Right? They give us some, right? And he says, if a person, or if a person, if a person was pure and he swallowed a ring which was tamei, and then he passed it. When anything else that passes out of you is tahar, right? Dung, whatever is tahar, right? Passes out of, is the ring tar? So Adam she'ena must no, it doesn't prevent it from he doesn't purify it. Anything else in your body is tamei. If you ate some tamei, I'll give you an example. Let's say it's some tamei food and you passed it. The dung is not, what you defecated is not tamei. But it doesn't prevent something which is tamei, like a ring that you swallowed when you pass it from its tumah. It doesn't purify it. Certainly, a person then should not prevent. If a person cannot make something which is tamei, listen, he's saying the kavachomer works the other way around. He's not saying your kavachomer is no good because of mikveh. He's saying, look at mikveh. I'll show you the exact opposite. By a person, he cannot be matar something. If he swallows a ring which is tamei and then he passes it, he's not matar. Yet, if he swallows a ring which is tahor, and then he goes into a funeral home and he's there with a dead body and he's tamei, the ring is tar. That's called tuma blua, right? Tahara blua, lo tamei. What's inside is not. So what do you see here? Just the opposite. Just the opposite. He can't purify something. A mikveh purifies something after it's tamei, but doesn't work preemptively. A man cannot purify something with his body. If he puts something tamei into his body, he cannot purify it. But yet, if he puts something tar into his body, it does work preemptively. He prevents the tumah from happening. So what do you see? That it doesn't depend on chumrah and kokula, anything like that. Thing doesn't mean anything. You can't compare and say if something works after the fact, it certainly worked preemptively before, prevented. It doesn't work at all. It doesn't work at all. And therefore, in other words, so what do you see over here? Again, the Girsan Argumar, read the Argumar, Ma make for Shemal Satmei Mitamosan, Aina Masal Tor Miltame doesn't prevent the tumah from happening. It doesn't shield the tar or something from becoming tamei. Adam she'ein also tamei, Adam which cannot purify something in his body. Ein adin shu lo yatzil al tam, and also not, if he can't purify it, he shouldn't be able to prevent something tar from becoming tamei, and yet it does. If you swallow a ring which is tar and you go into a basic kvaros, the ring is tar. The ring is tar. Shmamina. So what do you see again? Lo chayon. So you see that the two things are not related. And therefore, it doesn't prevent, and we're saying it doesn't. It's not chal at all. In other words, what we're saying is it prevents totally. It prevents totally. It's not like it's there and not there. It doesn't work at all. It's Amos Sefer. The Gemara says, wait a minute. That's what the Rabbanan said to Rav Lazar. Look at the other way. Amar Rav Lazar, imat bil and kli. Look at the case, not mikvah, but look at it from the kli's point of view. If you're tovel a kli tamei litar, if you're tovel a kli tamei, it becomes tar. Yatbilu kli like shei tamei litar. Are you also going to be tovel a kli that? And again, in advance, preemptively, I'm tovel the kli now, so that when it becomes tamei, it should become tar. From the fact that they said shelo yatzil when the Chachamim asked in the first case, and I'm at base, shelo yatzil should prevent it, should shield it from happening. Alatar miltame. It sounds like what? That it's shielding totally. We're talking about Rav Lazar. You say that something which works after the fact, so certainly work before to prevent it. Look at the mikvah where it works in advance, but it doesn't work to prevent it. Whereas a person works to prevent it, but doesn't work. But you see, prevention means that it's not chal at all. Yet in the Sefer, the Chacham said to Rav Lazar another svara. They said, if you be tovel a kli, which is tamei, to purify it, certainly you should be able to be tovel a kli, so that when it becomes tamei, it is tar. But if you look at when it becomes tamei tar, it sounds like that it is effective for a second. From that svara of the Chachamim, when they said to him, could you be tovel a kli so that when it becomes tamei, it will then become tar? Sounds like it is chal for a second. And that's for Shema min achaylan. Amri, so the rabbi, the yeshiva boy said, no. Rabbanan lo kaimilo betamid Rav Lazar. They didn't know Rav Lazar. In other words, from this discussion, we tried to prove from Rav Lazar's kal v'chomer, can you prove that it was not effective, or was it effective for a second and then it was canceled? We couldn't prove it from there, right? And we tried to prove from what Rav Lazar said to the Chacham, from what the Chacham said to Rav Lazar, from the way they phrased their questions upon him. But from the first question they raised with the mikveh, it sounds like it's not chal at all. From the second question they raised from the kli, they said, listen, if you can be tovel a kli tamei, you could be tovel a kli which is tamei to be matarid. It's not a kli cheres, of course, a kli that goes to a mikveh, like if it's wooden or metal or something like that. So could you also be tovel a kli so that when it becomes tamei, it should become Torah? That sounds like that it would be chal for a second. In other words, you're comparing that because can you also be tovel a kli so that when it becomes tamei, it becomes Torah? Sounds like when you make the netter, when she makes it, it's chal for a second and then becomes canceled. They didn't know what Rav Lazar meant. What do you hold? Do you hold when you say that you can cancel the netters of the nedarim of your wife in advance? Do you mean that it's chal for a second, then it's batel? So tavi kli tiyaftach. Then the kli is the kli. The last question is the question on you. That refutes your point, because you see a kli, you can't be tovel a kli so that it becomes tamish utar. You hold that it's not chal at all. So mikvah is your kasha. Mikvah is your kasha because mikvah should be preventively total. That would be your kasha. So we still couldn't prove. We can't prove our question. So our question is, according to Rav Lazar, is it chal for a second, then it's canceled, or is not chal at all? The final answer we'll see from the Toshma tomorrow in the middle of the page. Halfway down the page, like you say up in the small page. Halfway down the page. We'll pick it up tomorrow. Have a good day, everybody. Shavua tov.